The clock struck midnight, and Amelia's fingers danced across the keyboard with a newfound vigor. Her eyes were heavy, her mind weary from another day of closed-door meetings and endless emails. But as she logged into her favorite online dating site, a thrill of anticipation coursed through her veins. She knew that tonight, her mysterious online lover would be waiting for her, ready to consume her with his passionate words and unyielding desire. Amelia scrolled through her inbox, her heart racing as she found the familiar message from JD0323. It was always addressed to her in a way that made her feel desired, special. She clicked on the message, revealing a new window filled with his words, each one more seductive than the last. She took a deep breath and began to type, her fingers flying across the keyboard as her thoughts turned to the charismatic colleague who had somehow managed to remain elusive in real life, despite their late-night online encounters. As she wrote, Amelia felt herself losing track of reality, becoming more and more immersed in the fantasy world she and James had created together. The boundaries between their online and offline selves seemed to blur, and for a brief moment, she imagined what it would be like to finally meet him in person, to feel his touch, taste his kiss. She knew that if she wasn't careful, she might find herself falling for him in real life as well, a terrifying prospect given the delicate balance of their professional relationship. She forced herself to focus on the words in front of her, crafting a reply that was equal parts seductive and playful. As she hit send, a surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins, leaving her breathless and aching for his response. She closed her eyes, willing the seconds to pass more quickly, her heart racing in anticipation of the moment when her inbox would light up with his reply. Time seemed to stand still as she waited, her fingers trembling as she checked her messages every few seconds. Finally, with a sigh of relief, she saw the familiar message from James appear in her inbox. His words were just as passionate and alluring as she had hoped they would be, and she found herself lost in the world he had created, unable to resist the pull of their connection, even as she knew that things were about to change. The next day, Amelia could barely focus on work. Every time she looked up from her desk, she found herself glancing around the office, searching for James, wondering if he was thinking about her too. As they worked side by side on a project, she caught him looking at her more than once, a secret smile playing at the corners of his lips. She felt a shiver run down her spine, and for a brief moment, she forgot about the mess they were in. Later that evening, as they gathered in the break room to celebrate their team's success, Amelia couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for the anonymity of their online exchanges. The other colleagues, laughing and joking around, seemed to fade into the background as she found herself drawn into a private conversation with James. His eyes held hers, and she could feel the heat from his body as he leaned in close to whisper in her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. "I can't wait to see you tonight," he murmured, before turning away with a wink. The words sent a surge of desire through her, and she found herself counting the hours until she could log back onto her computer and lose herself in their passionate exchange once more. But as she sat there, surrounded by her co-workers, she knew that things were about to change. Soon, she would have to decide whether to continue playing this dangerous game, or to finally reveal the truth and risk everything. The days that followed were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for Amelia. As she continued to work side by side with James, their interactions became more intense and charged with sexual tension. She could feel his gaze on her constantly, and her heart would race whenever she caught him looking at her. Despite their newfound closeness, they maintained the charade of being strangers online, meeting only in the digital realm. It was a delicate balance that Amelia was terrified of losing. She found herself fantasizing about what it would be like to finally be with him, to feel his lips on hers, his skin against hers. The thought of revealing the truth to him, to see the look of shock and betrayal on his face, was almost too much to bear. But she knew that she couldn't continue like this forever. Sooner or later, someone was going to find out about their secret, and the consequences could be disastrous for both of them. One afternoon, as they sat together in a quiet corner of the office, Amelia mustered up the courage to broach the subject. She took a deep breath and turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. "James," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think we need to talk." He looked up at her, his eyes dark and intense, and she felt herself weakening beneath their gaze. "About us," she continued, her words tumbling out in a rush, "and what's going on between us, online." He leaned in closer, his breath hot against her ear. "I've been thinking the same thing," he whispered. "But I don't want to lose you, Amelia. I care about you too much." His words sent a shiver down her spine, and she felt herself trembling in response. "I don't know what to do," she confessed, her voice small and fragile. "I want this, whatever this is, but I can't risk my job, or our reputations." James reached out and took her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. "I understand," he said softly, meeting her gaze. "We'll figure something out. Together." And as their fingers entwined, Amelia couldn't help but feel a spark of hope flicker to life within her. The following week, they continued their careful dance, maintaining the charade of strangers while slowly inching closer to one another. They found excuses to work together on projects, to eat lunch together in the break room, even to stay late at the office. Their conversations became more intimate, more revealing, as they shared secrets and desires that they had never voiced to anyone else. One evening, as they logged into their favorite chat room, James surprised Amelia with a new screen name, "Your Fantasy Come True." A shiver of anticipation ran down her spine as she realized what he meant. With a whispered, "I'm here," she took control of the new identity, and together they embarked on a role-playing adventure unlike anything they had ever experienced. As the night wore on, the lines between reality and fantasy began to blur. Amelia could feel her heart racing, her body aching for James, both as herself and as her online alter ego. She could feel his desire for her, his need for her, and it was intoxicating. When at last they said their goodbyes and logged off for the night, Amelia lay awake in bed, her skin tingling and her thoughts consumed with the man who had become so much more to her than just a co-worker. The next day, as they walked side by side through the crowded office, Amelia couldn't help but wonder if James was thinking about their late-night adventures as much as she was. She felt a thrill of anticipation whenever he glanced her way, his eyes dark and intense. The air between them seemed charged with electricity, and every touch, every brush of fingers against skin, sent a wave of desire coursing through her veins. As the week progressed, their secret lives as "Your Fantasy Come True" and "Dark Desires" became more entwined with their real-life personas. They found ways to sneak off for quick encounters in empty conference rooms, or behind closed doors in the supply closet. Their co-workers began to notice the shift in their dynamics, but no one suspected the truth. Amelia felt a heady mix of exhilaration and fear, knowing that at any moment their secret could be revealed and their carefully constructed worlds could come crashing down around them. One afternoon, as they hurried to a meeting together, Amelia felt James' hand slide discreetly into hers. His touch sent a wave of heat coursing through her, and she squeezed his hand in reply. As they walked side by side down the hall, their bodies brushed against each other in a way that felt almost accidental. She could feel the hard outline of his erection pressed against her hip, and her own desire grew even stronger. The meeting seemed to drag on forever, and Amelia could barely concentrate on the discussion at hand. All she could think about was the way James was sitting there, his legs crossed, his crotch just inches from her own. She wanted nothing more than to reach over and touch him, to feel his skin against her own. Finally, the meeting adjourned, and they were able to slip away unnoticed. They found a quiet, dimly lit conference room where they could be alone.